Hello, today we're going to be talking about Book 4 of Bello, Gallico, Caesar's expedition into Britain. So, for context, Caesar had just fought off some Germans who had come into Gaul and were allowed to do so by some of the neighboring Gallic tribes. Some of Caesar's stated reasons for coming into Britain are to punish them for sending help to other Gallic tribes in other battles against the Romans. He also wanted to gain intel, as the Romans had limited knowledge of the island of Britain. Some reasons that he didn't state publicly, but were still probably there, were economic interests. If Caesar could create a reason for conflict with the Gauls, he could have those defeated sold into slavery, which was common, and could use the money to pay his soldiers, which is of course necessary to keep their loyalty, and to buy political support at home. As soon as Caesar reaches Britain, he is already immediately met by armed enemies on hills along the shore, a disadvantageous place to embark. So he waits for the other ships to arrive and then advances to a more level shore. The enemies take notice of this and send their forces, which Caesar notes consists of charioteers, a primitive way of fighting in the eyes of the Romans. Still, Caesar realizes his own disadvantages. His men have to jump from the ship into deep waters, carrying their heavy baggage and armor, and fend off the oncoming enemy just to reach level ground. The barbarians, being more familiar with the territory and having horses, were at a great advantage. Caesar combats this by having smaller ships released from the transport ships, which drive away the enemy with projectiles, allowing the Romans to reach the shore more easily. Caesar takes a moment to recognize the 10th Legion's standard bearer, who led the hesitant soldiers by example. "Jump, comrades," the eagle bearer tells them, "unless you wish to betray the eagle to the enemy. I certainly display my duty to the state and the commander-in-chief." And then he proceeds to take the eagle into the enemy. At this point, Caesar allays the confusion seen as soldiers scramble to find their standards, which the enemy takes advantage of by attacking. However, with the help of the warships, the soldiers are able to reach the shore and drive off the enemy, but cannot chase them for very long, since the ships with the cavalry have not arrived. This is unusual to what Caesar considers his divine favor with the gods. But Caesar wins anyway. The enemy sent ambassadors to negotiate peace and return Commius, whom Caesar had previously sent to them as an ambassador, yet they had chosen to imprison him. The ambassadors now blame the common people for this aggression, a reasonable thing to do in their position. They make sure to make it up to Caesar by promising to hand over some hostages of their own. Things would not go smoothly from here, though, for Caesar, as the ships with his cavalry are once more driven off course, and few make it to the island at all due to a heavy storm. What's more is that the storm takes out a number of the supply ships that Caesar's forces had arrived on. But Caesar wants you to know there was no way any of his men could help this fact. If there were, he surely would have thought of it. The Britons, now realizing that the Romans were stuck there without the cavalry and other supplies, decide they in fact don't need to hand over any hostages, and that if they can seize the opportunity to defeat Caesar here, no one will dare to come mess with them again. All of this Caesar didn't know for certain, but could kind of figure it out from the lack of hostages. So he orders his men to get busy. They begin to repair the ships that were salvageable with materials from the ships that weren't, so that a voyage could be made back to the mainland. Caesar then sends a legion to forage, but is alerted that there was more dust seen in the direction they had marched in than was expected. This prompts Caesar to follow with 2 cohorts, and he comes to discover that, as usual, what he had foreseen became a reality. The enemies had ambushed the legion while their weapons were down, and they were harvesting grain, and from there Caesar got to see for himself the British way of chariot fighting. They disturb the Roman ranks to create weaknesses, and only then do they jump from their chariots and fight on foot. The legion is overjoyed and revitalized as Caesar comes to their rescue, but once a retreat for all is attainable, Caesar elects to fall back. Remember, Caesar wants to bide his time to repair his ships, and provoking a much larger fight with the enemy could result in a poor outcome for Caesar's outnumbered troop. Following this encounter, a storm prevents the conflict from escalating for a few days and allows time for Commius, the guy who was imprisoned earlier, to bring over cavalry from the mainland, so that next time the enemy attacks, they will not only be driven off, but be able to be run down and slaughtered. Yay. Finally, ambassadors are once again sent to Caesar to do the whole hostage thing again, but for real this time. That concludes my Book 4 summary of De Bello Gallico. I hope you enjoyed.